2010 World Cup was absolute chaos.
It's Jabulani! Goal! Bafana!
Vuvuzelas roared across South Africa, and the unpredictable Jabulani swerved through the air, making this feel out of this world. Goals that crossed the line weren't given. Handballs broke the hearts of a nation. Legends were born, and these are only a few of the things that make the first World Cup in Africa one of the greatest of all time. In 2010, football was entering a golden age. Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team won the 2009 Champions League against Manchester United while playing some of the most breathtaking football the sport had ever seen. While Lionel Messi was the team's figurehead, Barca's Spanish-born midfielders, Sergio Busquets, Xavi, and Andres Iniesta, were the team's heartbeat, revolutionizing possession-based football. They passed the ball in triangles, rarely taking more than one or two touches to humiliate almost every opposition they faced. And luckily for the Spanish national team, the trio were equally effective on the international stage, winning the 2008 European Championships in a similar style. Several other stars who made that Barcelona team almost unstoppable, such as Gerard Piqué, Carlos Puyol, and David Villa, were also included in Spain's 2010 World Cup squad. While they entered the tournament as clear favorites, there were concerns about whether Barca's stars would cooperate with Spain's Real Madrid superstars such as Sergio Ramos, Alvaro Arbeloa, and Xabi Alonso. At the time, the El Clasico derby was at its fiercest, with world-class players clashing on every occasion when the rivals met. Could Spain keep their star-studded squad together to win a second consecutive international tournament? After all, they'd have competition. Their 2008 European Championships opponents, Germany, looked almost equally as impressive. The nation had numerous exciting young talents, including Bastian Schweinsteiger, Mesut Özil, and Toni Kroos, who could play one-touch passes among themselves to control matches. Meanwhile, it would be the first World Cup in which Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo would play in their prime years. Both were in their mid-20s, and each won one of the last two Ballon d'Or trophies. While neither of their respective nations, Argentina, who were managed by Diego Maradona, and Portugal was ranked among the tournament's most electric, there was a genuine feeling that one of the godlike talents could carry their nation to the World Cup. Any player who would guide their team to the tournament would have to understand how to manipulate the controversial Jabulani ball. The Adidas ball was designed in a way that made it swerve unpredictably, making it difficult for goalkeepers to handle. Before the tournament began, goalkeeper Gianluigi Buffon said, "The new model is absolutely inadequate, and I think it's shameful letting play such an important competition where a lot of champions take part with a ball like this," while Brazilian striker Luis Fabiano called the ball supernatural, as it unpredictably changed direction when traveling through the air. Not only was the ball unusual, but so was the South African crowd, who used vuvuzelas to create an atmosphere unlike anything that elite-level football had ever previously seen. So, who would win this unique-feeling World Cup tournament, and what stories would emerge along the way? Host South Africa opened the tournament against Mexico, in which they took the lead thanks to a goal from Sifiwe Shabalala, who celebrated by dancing with his teammates in a joyful style that appeared to epitomize the tournament. But Mexico equalized the scoring 10 minutes from time, and things would continue to get worse for the South Africans. They were beaten 3-0 in their second game against Uruguay, meaning that they were on the brink of elimination as they faced France in Group A's final game. But France were struggling to an equal extent, having only picked up 1 point from their opening 2 games, and the 2006 finalists suffered a shock 2-1 defeat to South Africa to confirm their exit from the tournament. Having only reached the tournament thanks to a controversial handball from Thierry Henry against Ireland in the playoffs, their early exit felt like karma. In their place, Uruguay and Mexico would finish inside the top 2 and qualify for the knockout stages. In Group B, Argentina picked up maximum points by beating South Korea, Greece, and Nigeria, but Messi didn't get himself on the score sheet. Critics were questioning whether the Ballon d'Or winner needed his Barcelona teammates to perform. Argentina were joined in the top 2 by South Korea, who finished with 4 points. In Group C, England's golden generation had passed its peak, but everybody still expected them to walk a group that featured the United States, Slovenia, and Algeria. But draws in their opening 2 games against the US and Algeria meant that they had to beat Slovenia in the final game. Jermaine Defoe scored the game's only goal, sending England to the knockout stages along the US, who also picked up 5 points thanks to a last-minute winner from Landon Donovan in the final game. Germany began Group D in style by thrashing Australia 4-0 thanks to goals from Lukas Podolski, Miroslav Klose, Thomas Müller, and Kakao. But expectations that the Germans could cruise to the trophy diminished slightly after they lost 1-0 to Serbia and only beat Ghana by a single goal. But Ghana were hardly in opposition to be written off, picking up 4 points and joining Germany inside the top 2. The Netherlands picked up 9 points in Group E by beating Denmark, Japan, and Cameroon. While the Dutch were winning games, they were uncharacteristically pragmatic and beating teams with efficiency rather than by utilizing total football. Japan finished in second place after wins against Cameroon and Denmark. Group F featured World Cup holders Italy. However, several of the legends, such as Marco Materazzi, Alessandro Nesta, and Alessandro Del Piero, who had helped them defeat France on penalties in the final, were not part of the squad. Meanwhile, other stars from that team, including Fabio Cannavaro, Gianluigi Buffon, and Gennaro Gattuso, had passed their prime and were entering their twilight years. Without a crop of youngsters emerging to replace them, Italy's 2010 World Cup display was an embarrassment, picking up just 2 points from their games against New Zealand, Slovakia, and Paraguay. The latter 2 nations exploited Italy's failure by qualifying for the knockout stages with just 5 and 4 points, respectively. Group G featured 2 of the tournament's most prolific attacks, Brazil and Portugal. Despite a goalless draw when the 2 nations met in the final group game, they scored 12 goals between them in their opening 2 matches against the Ivory Coast and North Korea. Finally, Spain's World Cup pursuit looked at risk of ending before it had even begun after losing their opening Group H match 1-0 against Switzerland. However, they won their final 2 games against Honduras and Chile to edge into the knockout stages. They were not playing in the vintage style that Barcelona had done with many of the same players in recent seasons, but were doing enough to grab results early in the tournament. Spain was accompanied in the knockout stages by Chile, who finished with an impressive 6 points. With the 2 finalists of the previous World Cup, Italy and France, suffering early exits, the tournament appeared wide open as the last 16 got underway. Still, few of the elite nations had displayed their best football during the group stages. Argentina and the Netherlands picked up maximum points, but rarely enthralled. Spain were not as fluid as they were during the 2008 European Championships. Brazil and Portugal were inconsistent, while Germany struggled after their opening day victory over Australia. As such, 2010 had the potential to be a year in which an underdog could lift the trophy or at least get itself to the final. The bracket was uneven, with Brazil and the Netherlands representing the only elite nations on one side of the draw. Meanwhile, Germany, Spain, Argentina, Portugal, and England were crammed into the other side, meaning that there would be some heavyweight clashes early in the tournament. But first, the round of 16 began with Uruguay versus South Korea. Luis Suarez introduced himself to global football audiences after notching his 2nd and 3rd goals of the tournament to help Uruguay to a 2-1 victory. It certainly would not be the promising young striker's final involvement in the tournament, but we'll get to that later. After finishing top of Group C, the United States perhaps overestimated its footballing ability. Some naive U.S. supporters expected the team to dominate the World Cup as if it were basketball, but they were humbled within 5 minutes of their last 16 tie with Ghana as Kevin Prince Boateng established an early lead. The U.S. did manage to take the tie to extra time after a 62nd minute penalty from Donovan, but ultimately lost after Asamoah Gyan scored the winner after 93 minutes. The final 2 games of that side of the draw were the Netherlands versus Slovakia and Brazil versus Chile, with the winner of each tie facing off in the quarterfinals. With the Dutch and the Brazilians the clear favorites for their respective ties, it felt like a warm-up that would precede a star-studded quarterfinal. And there were no shocks. Goals from Arjen Robben and Wesley Sneijder helped the Dutch to a 2-1 victory, while Brazil swept aside their South American rivals with a 3-0 victory thanks to goals from Juan, Luis Fabiano, and Robinho. Despite entering the tournament without their trusted attackers of yesteryear, Ronaldo Nazario, Ronaldinho, and Rivaldo, Brazil were showing that they still knew how to find the back of the net. Whispers that they could lift a 6th World Cup trophy began to grow louder. But before they'd face the Netherlands in the quarterfinals, there were several huge games on the other side of the last 16 bracket, starting with Argentina versus Mexico. It was a game in which 3 of the era's most prominent attackers, Carlos Tevez, Gonzalo Higuain, and Javier Hernandez, got on the scoresheet for their respective teams, but Argentina ultimately cruised to the last 8 with a 3-1 win. While Lionel Messi was having a quiet tournament in front of goal, Tevez and Higuain were excelling, while Di Maria was providing creativity from the wing that made many wonder whether the Argentines could go all the way. But their route to the final would not be easy, as they'd face the winner of England versus Germany in the last 16, and the international rivalry produced one of the stories of the summer. On paper, England's team, featuring Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, and Wayne Rooney, should have been capable of at least competing with the Germans. But Within minutes, it was clear that there was a huge gulf in class, with Germany's midfielders capable of producing intelligent passes and intricate off-ball movements that bamboozled England's defensive players. Yet, it was an uncharacteristic long ball from Manuel Neuer that went all the way to Miroslav Klose, who poked the ball into the net that opened the scoring. A second followed soon afterwards after Müller placed a ball to Lukas Podolski, who smashed the ball into the net. Matthew Upson pulled one back for England, and Lampard thought he had leveled it minutes later when his shot rebounded off the bar and crossed the line. But in the pre-goal line technology era, the goal wasn't spotted by the officials. England felt aggrieved by the refereeing decision, but even if it had been given, they were not as classy as the Germans on the day, who won the game 4-1 thanks to 2 second-half goals from Müller. As the English media started a manhunt on referee Jorge Larionda, many forgot that Paraguay and South Korea had a last 16 final tie of their own to play 2 days later. The two sides played out a goalless draw over 120 minutes before Paraguay won the game on penalties. Celebrations were initially exuberant until the players remembered that their quarterfinal tie would be against the winners of Spain versus Portugal. Neither Spain nor Portugal had ever lifted a World Cup trophy, but there was a feeling that both the Iberian Peninsula nations were getting closer. Spain had a squad filled with world-class talent that had already won the nation its first European championship, while Portugal had the brilliance of Ronaldo. The 2008 Ballon d'Or winner seemingly had the talent to win the tournament all by himself, but was yet to get going during the 2010 World Cup. He'd only scored once during the group stages and needed to produce something more memorable in the knockout phase to be within a chance of winning that year's Ballon d'Or, which seemed destined to be awarded to his nemesis, Messi. But it was Barca's star David Villa that scored the game's only goal after 63 minutes, continuing Ronaldo's wait for a first international tournament. Despite Spain's victory, their performance was not as artistic or as fluid as many had hoped, with Vicente Del Bosque's team dominating possession but creating few meaningful goal-scoring opportunities. It was a pragmatic, possession-based style that had never been seen before. Tactical styles that were centered around possession were usually executed with free-flowing football and attacking movement, but Spain's rigid performance was the complete opposite. At this stage, few supporters believed that Spain had the creativity or pace to go on and win the tournament. But before Spain had another chance to show the world their credentials, Uruguay and Ghana would get the quarterfinal action underway. The fixture might not have been built up as the game of the round, but what actually unfolded produced one of the most iconic stories in World Cup history. For Ghana, the stakes couldn't be higher. Win, and they become the first African nation to ever reach the semifinals of a World Cup. Having already defeated the United States and Serbia, many felt that they were capable of competing with their South American opposition, but Uruguay themselves were evolving from the tournament's dark horse to actual contenders. They cruised through the group stages without conceding a goal and had 2 top-tier forwards in Diego Forlan and Luis Suarez. Yet, it was Ghana's Sully Muntari who opened the scoring just before halftime with a long-range effort that underlined the efficiency of the Jabulani ball. It swerved in an unusual beach ball-like style, leaving Fernando Muslera rooted to the spot. If Uruguay were aggrieved about the ball, their complaints would have been quieted 10 minutes into the second half when Forlan converted a free kick where the ball swerved in a similar way to make the score 1-1. Game on. Despite a flurry of chances for both teams, neither side could make a breakthrough during normal time or until the final stages of extra time when something happened that shocked the world. After a last-gasp attack from Ghana, Dominic Adia headed the ball that looked destined to end up in the back of the net, but Uruguay's star man Luis Suarez acted as a goalkeeper, making a dramatic save on the line by using his hands. It was an unprecedented act of unsportsmanlike behavior from Suarez, but can he be blamed? Given that his nation was on the brink of being knocked out of the World Cup at the time, the forward was not blamed by the Ghanaian players, who celebrated as Suarez received a straight red card. They were awarded a penalty that, if they scored, would make them the first African team to ever reach a World Cup semi-final. But Asamoah Gyan hit the bar from his penalty as the red-carded Luis Suarez celebrated disrespectfully on his way down the tunnel. It would be the final kick of extra time, forcing Ghana to prepare for a shootout, having already missed a pressure penalty moments earlier. Gyan converted during the shootout, but misses from John Mensah and Dominic Adia meant that Sebastian Abreu could win the game for Uruguay. He sealed the shootout win with a cheeky Panenka, adding to the Ghanaian rage. In the days that followed, Suarez became public enemy #1 in the West African nation, while pundits from across the world debated the morality of his actions. But Uruguay couldn't care less. They were through to the semifinals, where they'd face the winner of the Netherlands versus Brazil. It was a game between two nations that had revolutionized the beautiful game. Brazil introduced the world to the samba style in 1970, while the Dutch total football of 1974 reshaped how the game was played for decades. But neither side played in the beautiful styles that defined the past in 2010. Brazil opened the scoring as a direct ball was threaded through the center of the pitch, which Robinho effortlessly converted. However, the Dutch equalized after Sneijder crossed the ball into the box, missing everyone and ending up in the back of the net. The teams were level after 53 minutes, with both goals coming in unorthodox ways, and the game was won by a less than beautiful goal as Sneijder headed home from a corner. The Netherlands were through, but the world was left questioning the quality of football at that summer's tournament. The following day, Argentina and Germany would have the chance to make up for the ugliness. Both sides had enjoyed strong tournaments, but Germany's 4-1 victory over England perhaps hinted that they were on a different level to any other team in the tournament, and it certainly appeared that way against Argentina too. Maradona's team needed a man to play in his image, yet Messi was nowhere to be seen. The Ballon d'Or winning forward started the game, but struggled to get involved as Germany's stars ran rampant in Cape Town. Müller opened the scoring with a header, and Klose tapped home an open goal to double their advantage. The elegant team didn't take their foot off the gas, as Bastian Schweinsteiger glided past several Argentine defenders before laying the ball off to Arne Friedrich for a simple finish. A miserable day for Argentina was rounded off by Klose, adding a fourth goal minutes from time. Germany was excellent and looked head and shoulders above any other side in the tournament, a claim that they'd have to earn in the next round as they'd face the winners of Paraguay against Spain. Paraguay's journey to the quarterfinals was admirable, but few expected them to pose many challenges to Spain's Barcelona-inspired team. But it was another ugly performance from Spain, who once again controlled possession while rarely having meaningful efforts on goal. Then, after 83 minutes, Iniesta produced a piece of magic by gliding past three defenders before placing the ball to Pedro, whose shot hit the post. But the ball landed to David Villa, who notched his fifth goal of the tournament, confirming a 1-0 victory that would take Spain to its first ever World Cup semifinal. The semifinals were made up of 4 teams that had been criticized throughout the tournament or had only reached the final of 4 by virtue of luck or controversy. While Uruguay's team was impressive, Suarez's handball against Ghana made neutrals root against them. Meanwhile, the Dutch were winning matches but playing with an ugly style that went against the nation's footballing philosophy. Germany was undoubtedly the best team at the tournament, but some had claimed they would have been eliminated had Frank Lampard's goal in the last 16 been awarded. Finally, Spain had been among the most underwhelming teams of the tournament. They were hyped as the most beautiful international football team in history before the World Cup began, but increasingly bored supporters as the summer went on. However, anybody who was disengaged by the summer's football would have been re-engaged by the 5-goal thriller between Uruguay and the Netherlands. A wonderful strike from Giovanni van Bronckhorst put the Netherlands ahead after 18 minutes, a position that few supporters expected them to squander. But Uruguay were always dangerous in attack and equalized through a 41st-minute long-range effort from Diego Forlan. The Jabulani ball was once questioned as it unorthodoxly flew past the keeper, but the Dutch were not ready to complain about the ball as they turned on the heat during the second half. After 70 minutes, Wesley Sneijder's deflected effort restored the Netherlands' lead, which was extended 3 minutes later as Arjen Robben got himself on the scoresheet. It looked as if Bert van Marwijk's team had one foot in the final until Uruguay's Maxi Pereira scored the game's third goal from outside the box to reduce the deficit to 1. However, the Netherlands held on to reach their first World Cup final since 1978. During that tournament, Ernst Happel's team played with a swagger and identity that was remembered for decades afterwards. While the Dutch had not been as beautiful during the 2010 World Cup, they had consistently shown that they knew how to win ugly and would not fear their opponents in the final, whether it was the tiki-taka passing of Spain or the transitional play of Germany. The two heritage European nations met at the Moses Mabida Stadium the following night. Germany entered the semi-final as clear favorites, having scored a combined 8 in their previous 2 matches against England and Argentina. They had a lethal attacking trio of Klose, Podolski, and Müller, who had scored 11 goals between them at the tournament. With Kos, Ezil, Khedira, and Schweinsteiger in the midfield positions, Lahm at defense, and Neuer between the sticks, they were emerging as a team that could dominate international football for a decade. By contrast, Spain won each of their knockout games by a single goal margin, and were largely uninspiring during the group stages. Everybody had been waiting for Spain to arrive at the World Cup and play their scintillating best, but hopes that they would provide entertainment value had largely diminished as the semi-final beckoned. But surely a team that lined up with Iniesta, Xavi, Alonso, Busquets in midfield could find some creativity to make the game against Germany an all-timer. Well, it actually transpired in comparable fashion to their 1-0 victories over Portugal and Paraguay. Spain dominated the ball and prevented Germany from creating opportunities, but rarely created chances of their own until Puyol climbed the highest to convert Xavi's 73rd minute corner to put them a goal ahead. As Puyol ran off in celebration, Barcelona stars celebrated in the arms of Real Madrid icons. It was a powerful visual image that demonstrated that even though they had their differences at club level, they had put them behind them and were on the brink of helping Spain to reach its first ever World Cup final. They held on for the final 20 minutes and celebrated in an exuberant fashion that might be less visible if Spain qualify for this summer's World Cup final. While Barcelona and Real Madrid have always been the big boys at club level, the international team never had the same reputation on the world stage. Spain reaching a major final felt fresh, exciting, and new, and there was a growing sense that they could beat the Netherlands in the final. Even if they had not produced vintage football throughout the tournament, their team was far superior to the Dutch player for player. However, the Netherlands, also using a pragmatic approach, it was set to be a final that would be won by discipline, structure, and conservatism rather than the expressive football that's associated with the two nations. But few could have predicted just how ugly the 2010 World Cup final would be. The Netherlands lined up in a 4-2-3-1 formation with Robin van Persie, Dirk Kuyt, Wesley Sneijder, and Arjen Robben, the team's most attacking players. Having scored 12 goals across the tournament so far, it appeared to be a team that was capable of breaking down Spain's defense, which had not conceded since their opening day defeat to Switzerland. With El Clasico rivals Sergio Ramos, Gerard Piqué, Carlos Puyol, Xabi Alonso, and Sergio Busquets occupying Spain's most defensive positions, the team rarely conceded chances through their possession dominance inside their half. Each player was elite on the ball and tired teams by passing from side to side before threatening the opposition's goal in the latter stages of the matches. While Xavi and Andres Iniesta were unable to get on the ball and create chances as frequently as they'd hope, it was a tactic that had worked for Spain throughout the tournament. With one game standing between them and their nation's first World Cup win, they were set to use the same conservative approach. Nonetheless, the Dutch might have felt technically inferior to Spain because in the early stages of the game, it was clear they had one tactic: to unsettle their opponents through aggression. Several poor early challenges were made before Robin van Persie became the first player to enter the book after 15 minutes. Incredibly, that was the first of 14 cards that would be brandished during the final that turned into a bloodbath. After 28 minutes, Nigel de Jong made arguably the worst challenge ever in a World Cup final, delivering a shocking kung fu kick on Xabi Alonso, somehow leaving the exchange with just a yellow card. The Dutch were more than fortunate to keep 10 players on the field, but their tackling did not soften. After 56 minutes, Johnny Heitinga fouled David Villa and complained to the referee about what he believed to be a dive, only to find himself in the book. Even if the Netherlands' tackling was ugly, it was keeping them in the game, with neither side looking like scoring. In fact, Arjen Robben went clean through moments later to put the Dutch into the lead, but had his shot saved by Iker Casillas. Towards the end of the game, Xavi, Iniesta, and Villa started to combine more fluently, with the latter missing a golden opportunity towards the end of the 90. But the teams could not be separated, and the final went to extra time, where Heitinga received a red card after 109 minutes to swing the final in Spain's favor. With growing momentum and a man advantage, they had 10 minutes to exploit the Dutch before a penalty shootout would be called. Then, finally, after 116 minutes, the moment came. Fernando Torres attempted to cross the ball to Iniesta, but his pass was blocked, only to drop to Cesc Fabregas, who completed the pass himself and rolled it to the Barca star, who was unmarked inside the box. Iniesta was a silky midfielder, but he was rarely relied upon to be clutch in the box. Yet he took a touch, let the ball bounce, and smashed the ball into the net like a 20-goal-a-season striker to win Spain its first World Cup. After the final whistle, the Spanish players broke to their knees. They'd become the first European team since France in 2000 to win consecutive international tournaments and had managed to do so despite not playing at their best. But Spain's success was a reminder that international football victories are defined by control, defensive shape, and mentality as much as they are by creativity and flair. Even when the Spanish had arguably the most creative team in football history, Manager Vicente Del Bosque knew that ensuring his team did not get drawn into basketball matches and limited spaces defensively was the way to guarantee success. And it worked. Spain won the World Cup with the team playing cohesively, while individual stars like Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo had returned to their home nations weeks earlier.